previous video, we learned the basics of Sass mixins, but let's see how we can make them even more powerful. First, let's take a look at the mixin that we've created. On 6 different lines here, we have the same value being repeated over and over again. Keep in mind that you can use other Sass features here, such as variables. Adding in a variable here will save us the pain of having to change our border radius on 6 different lines should we want to change it. So let's make this better. I'll go ahead and put in our radius variable there, and we'll set it to 50 pixels, and then we'll just go ahead and copy and paste the radius variable, and we'll just paste it where it says 30 pixels. And when we switch back and refresh, as you can see, our borders have become slightly more curvy, so our variable is indeed working correctly. Now, this mixin works well, but what if we wanted some of our borders to be more rounded than others? With our current setup, we would have to create a whole nother mixin and repeat all of this code, which is the problem that we were trying to solve in the first place. So in the previous video, I said that Sass mixins are similar to built-in functions, and that's because mixins can actually take arguments. So let's try to improve our teardrop function by first allowing for a radius argument. So here, we'll go ahead and change our signature here and allow for a radius, and we'll just go ahead and delete this radius variable here. And now we need to go to the places where we're using our mixin and make sure that we go ahead and pass in that radius value. So here we're using our mixin, and for our posts we'll give them a radius of, say, 30 pixels. For our pictures we'll give them a radius of 10 pixels, and just so we can really differentiate this, we'll give our sidebar a width of 50 pixels. And when we go back and refresh, you can see that our sidebar does indeed have much curvier borders than our pictures do. So we can say that this is indeed working. Now, we have a much more flexible mixin that we can use for more purposes. However, if we go back to our code, it would have been a lot nicer if we weren't required to pass these an argument. Sometimes it's nice to just have a good default, and then you can decide later if you want to tweak things from there. Luckily, we can assign default arguments like this. So for our radius, we'll go ahead and say 50 pixels for our default. And then if we were to say, go back to our pictures and just give them the default radius, and when we go back and refresh, you can see that our default is indeed being applied to our pictures. There. Now, let's say that we wanted our teardrop curves to be on the opposite corners of where they are now. That is, instead of curving the upper left and lower right corners, what if we wanted to instead curve the upper right and lower left corners? With our current setup, that would be pretty tricky, and once again, it would require us to create a whole separate mixin that for the most part has pretty much the same code. Fortunately, Sass features some basic control flow, and you can use some basic Boolean operators. With these two things, we can make our mixin a little bit more flexible. So first, let's go ahead and create a left and right variable with the strings left and right. So in our mixin here, we'll go ahead and just create a left variable with the string left and a right variable with the string right. And then we'll go ahead and put these strings into our property names. We'll go ahead and interpolate left here, and that does indeed need to be a variable. And we'll go ahead and copy that there and paste it here and paste it here. And then we also need to do this for right, so I'll change left to say right there. And I'll copy that, and we'll paste it there and there. Then just for good measure, let's go ahead and switch back and refresh to make sure we haven't broken anything. That's good. And now we need a way of switching these left and right variables around, and we also need a way to trigger that switch. So first, we'll go ahead and create a Boolean argument called reverse, and by default, we'll set reverse to false. So we'll create our argument, reverse, and set it to false. However, if we check reverse and it turns out that it's true, then we need to go ahead and switch these left and right variables around. So we'll go ahead and say if the variable reverse, and that's implied that if it's true, then we'll go ahead and say left is right and right is left. So let's switch back and refresh. Looks like we haven't broken anything. That's always good to check. And now let's go ahead and scroll down to our post and use this new argument that we've put into our mixin. There's our post right there. And we'll just put a comma and we'll say true. And when we switch back and refresh, there you have it. Our teardrop effect is now being reversed on our posts, but it is not being reversed on our other elements. Now you can actually put in any truthy value that you want. You don't necessarily have to use the word true. In Sass, any string is a true value, so we could go ahead and use a more friendly word like reverse instead of true. That about wraps things up for Sass mixins. This one Sass feature can save you a lot of time and make your code a lot more maintainable.